Aldous Reach had lived on the fourth floor of a walk-up on West 133rd Street since 1920. He was 68 years old in the autumn of 1951. Retired from a life he didn't talk about at church. And for the past 2 years, he had taken to spending his mornings on the fire escape. Coffee in one hand, watching the birds come to the seed tray he'd nailed to the iron railing. He didn't know their names. He just liked having them there. On a Tuesday in October, he heard it. A dull, hollow sound. Less than a second, then silence. He looked down. On the grate below his kitchen window, a male cardinal lay perfectly still, red as something spilled, eyes open, not moving. Aldous set down his coffee. He stood there a long time, looking at that bird, not knowing what had happened, not knowing what he didn't know. That sound happens in American yards every single day, and almost no one who hears it understands what they are actually witnessing. What you are about to learn will change the way you look at every window in your house, and every bird that trusts your yard enough to come back. Aldous told himself the bird was simple, that it didn't see right, or move too fast, or just made a mistake the way animals sometimes do. He told himself that for 2 days. Then he stopped believing it. Because here is what that cardinal actually saw when it looked at his window. Not glass, not a barrier, not a warning of any kind. It saw the elm tree on the far side of the alley, reflected perfectly in the pane. It saw open sky. It saw the continuation of the world it had been flying through all morning. Every signal that bird had ever learned to trust, every instinct honed over millions of years of flight, told it the path was clear. So it flew, at full speed, toward home. Glass is one of the youngest things in the human world. Birds have had no evolutionary time to learn what it means. The window didn't trick the cardinal. It told the cardinal the truth, and then the truth wasn't there. Aldous hadn't built a trap, he'd built a mirror, and the bird believed it. After the cardinal, Aldous moved the seed tray. He slid it 6 inches further from the window, toward the railing's edge. Felt like the right thing. Felt like distance meant safety. He went back inside satisfied. The way a man feels after tightening a loose bolt without knowing the engine is the problem. What he didn't know, what almost nobody knows, is that distance in the wrong range doesn't reduce the danger. It perfects it. Ornithologists at Cornell Lab have measured this precisely. A bird startled from a feeder, positioned between 10 and 30 feet from a window, builds exactly enough speed to make the impact fatal. Not enough distance to redirect. Too much distance to survive the glass. Aldous's seed tray sat 15 feet out, the precise middle of the kill zone. He'd placed it there because a hardware store clerk told him birds liked open space. The clerk wasn't wrong about the birds. He just didn't know about the physics. There are only 2 safe distances, under 3 feet or beyond 30. Everything in between is not a compromise. It is a corridor. It was Dorothea Voss who noticed it first. She lived 1 floor down, played piano at a club on 125th Street, and never saw sunrise if she could help it. But that autumn she'd been sleeping poorly, the kind of restless that has no name. And she'd started sitting by her window in the early mornings with a cigarette and whatever was left of the previous night. She knocked on Aldous's door one afternoon and said, without greeting, "That sound only happens before 9. Aldous pulled out the small notebook he'd started keeping. Checked the dates, checked the times. She was right, every single entry, before 9. Here is why. In the first 2 hours after sunrise, east-facing windows catch the sun at a direct angle and become near-perfect mirrors. At the same moment, birds are at their most active, hungry, moving fast, flying with the full urgency of morning. Peak reflectivity meets peak bird movement. Researchers call it a collision corridor. Aldous just called it Tuesday. In breeding season, it worsens. During fall migration, it becomes something else entirely. But that comes later. Somewhere in the second winter, Aldous started giving them names. Not all of them. Just the ones that came back. The ones with habits. A particular branch they favored. A specific way of tilting the head before landing. The male cardinal who arrived first every morning, before the light had fully decided what it was doing, and sat on the railing like he owned the building. Aldous named him Ezra, after a deacon he'd once respected. Ezra came every morning for 2 years, through 2 winters, 1 ice storm, the whole long heat of 2 Harlem summers. Aldous started his coffee when he heard the wings. One October morning, Ezra didn't come. Aldous waited, drank the coffee standing up, told himself the bird was somewhere else, doing bird things, went inside. Came back out an hour later. He found the feathers on the fire escape below the window. Just a few. Enough. The American Bird Conservancy estimates between 600 million And 1 billion birds die in window strikes across the United States every year. That number is almost impossible to hold, so hold Ezra instead. His grandson Cephas was 9 years old and had his mother's instinct for broken things. The immediate, unthinking need to gather them up and carry them somewhere warm. He found the sparrow on a Saturday morning below the kitchen window, sitting stunned on the fire escape grate, eyes open, breathing. Cephas picked it up with both hands before Aldous could say a word, cupped it against his chest, carried it inside to the kitchen table, where the light was good and the radiator was running. He looked up at his grandfather, certain he had done the right thing. Aldous didn't know enough yet to tell him otherwise. The bird went still within the hour. What Cephas couldn't have known, what most adults don't know, is that a stunned bird is already in acute physiological crisis. Its system is flooded. The handling, the warmth, the heartbeat of a child pressed against it. All of it registers as predator. Cortisol spikes. The heart, already strained, gives out. 90% of stunned birds survive if you put them in a dark, quiet box and leave them alone for 30 minutes. Cephas cried for a long time. So did Aldous. Later, privately after Ezra, Aldous started listening differently. Not for the thud. He'd always heard that. He started listening for what came after. The 3 or 4 seconds of total silence that followed a strike, as though the whole fire escape held its breath. And then the calls, sharp, urgent, layered on top of each other from the roofline and the elm tree and the gap between buildings. He'd heard those sounds 100 times. He'd thought they meant hawk. They don't always mean hawk. Researchers at the University of Washington have documented what ornithologists call a predator alarm cascade, a rapid chain of alarm calls triggered when birds register a sudden violent impact nearby. Chickadees are the most precise communicators. The more syllables added to their call, the higher the perceived threat. Aldous didn't know the science, but he started writing down what he heard. What he understood slowly was that the yard had been reporting to him for years. Every strike he'd slept through, every thud he dismissed as a branch, or the building settling. The birds had marked each one, loudly, accurately. He just hadn't learned the language yet. Here's what Aldous didn't know about the light he left on. Every night, after the dishes, he switched on the small lamp by the kitchen window. Not for any particular reason. The apartment had been quieter since Clara passed, and the light made it feel less so. A small, ordinary habit, the kind a man doesn't think to examine. Twice a year, billions of birds cross the North American continent in darkness. They navigate by starlight and the pull of the Earth's magnetic field, a system refined over millions of years, precise enough to move a single warbler from the Gulf Coast to Canada and back again without error, until there is light where there shouldn't be. Urban glow pulls them off course. Disoriented, they begin circling lit buildings, unable to resolve artificial light from starlight, until exhaustion drops them against the glass. A yellow warbler that crossed the Gulf of Mexico 3 nights earlier, that flew through darkness over open water on reserves of fat it spent weeks building, can end its journey against a kitchen window in Harlem because one man couldn't stand the quiet. Aldous read this and sat with it a long time. There is a free tool called Birdcast that forecasts peak migration nights by region. Just those nights. Just those hours. Turn off the light. He didn't do it all at once. That's not how Aldous did anything. First, the window. He bought tempera paint from a shop on Amsterdam Avenue and spent a cold morning on the fire escape applying it to the outside of the kitchen glass. A grid of small marks, 2 inches apart horizontally, 4 inches vertically, across the full surface. Not a hawk silhouette. Not a single decal centered on the pane like a warning no bird could read. The whole surface. Researchers are unambiguous. Anything less than full coverage and the birds fly through the gaps. Then the feeder. He moved it to 11 inches from the glass. It felt wrong, felt like he was crowding them. But at that distance, a startled bird bounces. It doesn't build speed, it survives. Then the light. On migration nights, Birdcast told him when. He turned it off. Sat in the dark for a while. Let the apartment be quiet the way it actually was. In November, a cardinal appeared on the sill. Different bird. Wrong shade of red slightly. Smaller across the shoulders than Ezra had been. Aldous watched it eat. He did not reach for his notebook. He did not look for a name, he just watched. Go back to that Tuesday morning in October. Aldous on the fire escape, coffee in hand. The light just deciding what it was. The elm tree across the alley reflected in the kitchen window, perfect and convincing. An open world where there was only glass. The thud. Less than a second. Then silence. He didn't know standing there that the feeder was in the kill zone. Didn't know the window was a mirror. Didn't know the lamp he left on every night was pulling birds out of their ancient paths through the dark. He just knew a red bird was lying still on the iron grate, and the morning felt wrong in a way he couldn't name. Now you know what that moment contained. You've heard that sound. Maybe last week. Maybe years ago. Maybe you went to the window and found nothing, and told yourself it was a branch and went back to your coffee. Maybe you found the bird and didn't know what it needed. You know now. The window, the feeder, the light. 3 things. Any one of them, starting today, saves something that chose to be in your yard. What you do next is up to you.